Hello and welcome to the
Oh,
A&W podcast. My name is Toby Williams, and as always, I'm joined by Daniel Wilson.
what is up, everybody?
Thank you so much for tuning into our very first episode of the podcast. We are
Yeah.
so excited.
Yeah, we're really excited to get this podcast rolling. We've actually been talking about doing it for about 2 years now?
A year and a half,
Year and a
but
half, yeah.
we just were spending time perfecting it so that we could give you guys
Yeah,
the best podcast possible.
yeah, perfecting it, getting to know each other a little bit more. A lot's changed since we first had this idea. A lot.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know who we are or what we are both part of a ministry called Life Action, and we spend 9 months out of the year traveling to
Mhm.
churches all over the country hosting revivals.
Yeah, yeah. So Toby, you've been doing this for 2 years now?
Yep.
Yeah, 2 years now. I've been doing this for 3, and so the past 2 years we've been doing it together, going into churches like Toby was saying. We've been in probably like close to 40 churches.
7 or
Yeah,
38.
37 or 38 churches in the past 2 years. And so we've both had you've had the same role actually both years. You served as our team's youth speaker, and I've been singing on the stage as a vocalist, worship leader. So
So we've both been in the ministry for a couple years, and we thought it would be really cool to reflect on everything that God has done over these past 2 years. And
Yeah.
sometimes Daniel will even tell us a little bit about what it was like before I was traveling.
Yeah, BT.
So those will be some of the episodes and some of the things that you have to look forward to in the future. So we are super excited that you guys are tuning in. We're going to talk a lot about what God has done in these churches all over the country and how we got to experience it. But Daniel, as the listeners probably know, we do a lot of traveling.
Yes.
So one of the things we want to do, one of the segments we're going to have on this show is called Road Life Revelation. Road Life Revelation. And so I want you to just share with us a little bit about what it's like to travel, but I have specific questions. So today, the question is this. We all know that when you're traveling, you have to make lots of pit stops, right?
Just a little bit, yeah.
So where are your favorite stops? Like what do you prefer if you had
Buc-ee's are nice, I'll say that. Cheap, yes, but it's really hard to just get in and out. They have amazing bathrooms, amazing snacks, but you always get sidetracked and it's just hard to get in and out. So I'd probably have to go.
we always plan for like what, half an hour at
Yeah, half an
least?
hour, which you definitely don't need. But I'd probably say though I'd have to go with Love's for the most consistent, just because they're pretty much all the time clean. You have everything you need, fairly safe. If your truck breaks down, you have a shop right there. So I'd probably have to go with Love's.
Yeah, we love Loves. We spend lots of money
Yeah.
fueling up there, but also
I've never been to a Love's that doesn't work.
that's a good point. We also spend a lot of money at Loves on other things. So Daniel, when you're in a gas station like Loves, what are you reaching for?
Well, first off, I'm reaching for probably, let's see here. Depends on first off, I have to get gas. I have to fill up the bus with diesel, and that's the first.
That's your responsibility,
Yeah,
right?
that's. I mean, most of the time, yeah. Sometimes, you or someone else will fill up.
But since you're the bus driver, you have to do it most
So
of
that's
the time.
the first thing I have to go and reach. The first thing I have to buy. Then once I go inside, I usually will, use the bathroom. But then when it comes to drinks and snacks, I usually don't get a snack or anything to eat. But yeah, I would say that I probably will go for like a Celsius or a Reign. If they have Zoa, I'll go for a Zoa.
Yeah, you really like the Zoas.
Yeah, Zoas are nice. Yeah, shout out Dwayne Johnson. This isn't sponsored, but if you want to sponsor us, that would be great.
Yeah, Zoa energy drinks. Come hit us up.
Also, how did you find our podcast?
And I think for myself, most of the time I'm reaching for a drink. Loves, one of the things I like about them is that they do discounts or coupons.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you can do the buy one, get one free. Since my fiance and I, we travel together, anything I get, it's better for me to just get 2 of them since she's going to take one of mine anyway. Yeah,
so jumping on to a different topic, since we first had the idea for a podcast, you're engaged now. You weren't even dating anyone then.
Yeah, I was a single Pringle back then.
Tell us about that.
So I'm not going to give you the full story because I think we can save that for another podcast episode.
Yeah, for sure.
But the short of it is that when God brought me to Life Action, he also was moving to bring my fiance, who I didn't know would be, of course, my fiance, onto the team from another team. So, Life Action, we have 3 traveling ministry teams, and Destiny, my fiance, she has been a part of the red team and the blue team. And now we are both part of the silver team. But at the time when I joined, I had no idea that she was even there. And so God brought her to silver team at the same time he brought me. According to her, when she first met me, she was like, "Who is this guy?"
Yeah.
So obviously that's the
Yeah.
way all good love stories start. And from there, we really got connected, became really good friends pretty quickly, and feelings develop. And
Yeah.
like I said, it's a long story, but the short
Yeah.
of it is that we are excited in 90 something days to get to choose each other for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, that's super cool, super impactful.
Changing,
Yeah,
for sure.
life changing. It really goes to show that your life does change and can change pretty quickly too. Yeah, for those listeners that don't know who Life Action is and anything about it, one of the things we like to joke about is that it's called Wife Action because a lot of the people that join end up walking out married. I mean, I think by the end of this year I will have been to 8 weddings from people that I've traveled with. So that goes to show
Yeah, I know
everybody and their mom is getting married.
when I was in college, the saying was ring by spring, and it's definitely the same here traveling. Ring by spring is what happens a lot of the time. So,
So I have a question for you. Quick question. So looking back in your past 2 years, you've had a lot of time to just be on the bus. What is your favorite thing to do on the bus? And you can't say hold Destiny's hand.
right, because
What?
that's actually not allowed.
No, that's not allowed. But what's like the best thing to do on the bus in your free time?
I think some people would say sleep. I definitely see a lot of
Mm.
team members, they just go to sleep for hours and
Mhm.
hours, but that's not me. I really enjoy socializing, seat hopping,
Yeah.
talking to different people, stirring up fun. So that would
Yeah.
probably be my answer. I like to keep the bus lively,
Yeah.
make sure that I check in with the bus driver, all of that sort of a thing. So I
Yeah.
definitely like the social aspect of it more and kind of keeping people awake or lively.
Yeah, those are all.
Also, the snacks. We have a snack bin that we carry around with us, and it's always fair game. And sometimes
Always fair game.
you find some diamonds in the rough for sure.
Yeah, but sometimes you just be getting the stuff that nobody wants, and it's just been there for like 5 weeks.
Yeah, sometimes
Yeah.
people really don't want the trail mix that's like 90% raisin. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I
Those
don't
are
like
rough.
trail mix anyways, but yeah, that stuff's just sits there, and then people just think that people are gonna eat it. Yeah.
Do you remember the first travel day to our first conference of your second year, my first year?
Oh, I kind of do. I know I drove
Yep.
the second day, I think. Nope, I drove the first day.
First day.
I drove the first day. I specifically remember we were to Lumberton, North Carolina.
Yep.
And we were in the box truck. We made a couple of wrong turns and stuff like that. Somehow we ended up in the country, and we definitely should have been pulling down some power lines with how small the area was and the roads were.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember.
You remember who rode with you?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it wasn't the birthplace of A&W podcast because we had already thought of it at that point, but that was the first time that we really put our heads together and
Yeah.
tried to make it happen. Spent most of the truck ride
Yeah.
doing some graphic design, working on some of the digital part of our podcast, and we even tried to record a few episodes in the box truck,
Yeah.
but
It's way too loud.
that was never
Yeah.
gonna work. We
No.
needed a multi-thousand-dollar setup to even try and make it possible.
Yeah, that wasn't gonna work.
But fun fact about the origin of our podcast, we actually wanted it to be done in the box truck on the road while we were traveling
Yeah.
with Life Action.
Yeah, we really wanted to do that. We also came up with the logo. We got stickers. Our stickers were starting to get made then.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, you guys can reach out to Daniel or I about purchasing a sticker if you want to support the show.
Yeah.
They're $2 and they're our logos.
Yeah.
You can put them on anything. So.
Yeah, and you'll be able to find us on Spotify. So that was our travel day to the first conference. So we ended up going to Lumberton, North Carolina.
Yep, we slept in a hotel in West Virginia. I remember that.
Really? It was West Virginia.
And our first dinner together was Cheddar's.
I remember that.
Actually, our first lunch together was McDonald's. I also remember that.
I don't remember the McDonald's, but I remember
There was
the
like
Cheddar's.
There were like seats outside, but it was like
Yeah.
stone or concrete
Yeah.
tables.
Actually, I remember the hotel that we stayed in too. It was the Micro Hotel thing. I
Really?
think. No, it wasn't Micro. It was next to a Micro Hotel. But we parked the box trucks in the bus at a Cracker Barrel.
Yep.
And then I stayed in a room with Johnny and Andrew Tollison.
Cameron Arnold was my very first roommate, but he probably feels bad about how tired he was because he drove that bus for so long and
Oh
he
man,
literally conked as soon as he hit the hotel bed.
I don't blame him. Yeah, that was I remember there's a crazy sunset too when we walked out of Cheddar's.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But
Do you remember what we did when we first arrived at Lumberton, which was Antioch Baptist Church? It wasn't the very first thing that we did, but the next day,
oh,
Saturday
we did like
morning,
a
do you
prayer walk
remember?
thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was so long ago, man.
So when we met the staff at Antioch Baptist Church, they had a pastor who was overseeing prayer in the church, and he had organized a prayer walk around the campus, I believe.
Yeah.
And there was a good number of people there.
Yeah, there's a really good amount of people there. The church also had a school connected to it, so that was pretty cool. And part of it was praying over that too, just
Yeah.
because it's not like the church is just empty during the week. The church is pretty full with students and kids and stuff. So yeah, we did the prayer walk. We had everything set up. I don't think we put up the Pixel Flex.
We did not.
We didn't put up the
So
Pixel
we
Flex.
travel with a 20-foot LED wall.
Yeah, something like that. 2024.
That we hang on trusses and we put up in most churches, but we couldn't put it up at this church because of the way that their choir risers were and so forth. It was not an ideal setup for that. But that church was really special. I don't know if we've even done a prayer walk to start a conference.
Not technically, but this year we've been starting praying by ourselves as a team, like for about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we spend about 30 minutes when we arrive at a church praying together, so that's really meaningful. But yeah, I think the organized prayer walk from the church's side, that's a great idea. If anybody listening to this podcast is interested in hosting Life Action at a church, strongly encourage you to make that a part of your preparation going into it.
But yeah, so we were at that church. I remember the sanctuary was fairly big too,
It was.
compared to a lot of the churches that we've been to. There's 4 buildings counting the school.
Yeah.
So it was a really big church, kind of in the middle of nowhere. I remember it was a good church.
It was old too. It was 18 something.
Something like that, really old.
1899 maybe.
And then if you remember Mr. Al,
Yes.
you remember him?
Yes.
He was a really good guy to talk to. What else happened before? Well, Friday night when we rolled up to the church, had our host home meeting our host homes, and then we found out that we didn't technically have a host home.
Yeah, that was for the guys. That was a little bit of a shock slash surprise because we had thought we were getting a host home, which is where a family in the church opens up their house to let team members live in it for a couple days. But that particular church, they decided to put us all of the guys into one place.
Yeah. So we stayed in this one building. I can't even say it's a house, but we pull up to the building and there's, fences, gates and stuff like that around the whole compound. And it was right next to, I believe there's an airport right next to it.
Yes, it was very close by.
So we pull up and it looks like it's the back of a Home Depot. So we pull up there and we're all just trying to figure out what is going on. And this was, I'm trying to think, we probably had like what, 10 guys on the team?
Yeah, it was 10 or 11.
10 or 11 guys on the team at that point. So we pull up and we're all just confused as to what's going on.
Turns out that the guy who led us into the building, his name was Jay.
Yeah, Jay.
Part of the leadership of an organization called Baptist on Mission. And they were a North Carolina state thing, and they helped with disaster relief and other things during any time of emergency and stuff like that. And so they had basically a dormitory for whoever was volunteering to help serve. So like it was basically home base for them. So they could sleep and shower and get all the tools that they needed. They had a huge fellowship hall, dining hall. And then do you remember the snack room?
Dude, the snack room was just filled with stuff. Some things weren't things that I would necessarily eat, but then there's a lot of things that I definitely would. And then we slept in a room just with bunk bed after bunk bed, which was a little bit aggravating at first because we had just come on the road from camp. And so we were at our family camp up in Michigan for about 7 weeks, some of us 7 or 8 weeks. And we went from bunk bed to bunk bed. So pulling up there was, not what we were expecting. It's still sharing a bedroom with about 8 guys, but We ended up actually having 2 rooms. We had one room that I think 7 of us guys stayed in.
And then there was like the
And then there's
snorers.
the snorers room that we put in the other room.
So all the guys who were loud snorers, I think Cameron, Johnny,
I
who else
remember
was put in there?
we had some
Josh Pickering, I think, went in
yeah,
there.
Josh went in there. I slept really good though because there wasn't any windows. There wasn't too much light. But then do you remember one of the mornings
Yeah, I
a
remember this.
guy just starts banging on the door and he's like, "Hey, you guys coming to breakfast?"
It was like 7 in the morning,
And I was like,
6:30.
it was like 6:30, yeah, and we had to be at the church at 10.
I remember getting woke up to that and realizing that it would be incredibly rude if we skipped breakfast because those
Yeah.
guys had cooked it for us. And so just going back to the room and turning on the light and getting everybody to get up and go get food because they had spent so much time and energy making that for us. And so it was definitely a way to
Yeah.
show gratitude.
But yeah, that it ended up being a really, really good host home. I think we all enjoyed it. Part of it was just different, so you really don't know what you're gonna get yourself into.
Yeah,
We had a lot of laughter that week.
I had cookout
Yeah,
for the
cookout.
first
That was
time
the first
ever.
time you had
I had
cookout?
never heard of cookout.
Whoa.
There was no cookout
Whoa.
in Louisiana that I know of. Never heard of it, and so that was a really crazy
That's
experience.
crazy. I remember Johnny cracked me up a few times. Anyways,
Johnny's a
we'll
great guy.
talk about him some other time, maybe bring him on the podcast.
So
Um,
one of the moments that I really, really want to highlight about Lumberton, our very first conference of that year, my first conference
yeah.
ever, was that God was doing some tremendous stuff. So a few weeks in advance of the conference, I called the youth director and had some conversations with him and prayed for him and got there and learned that he had just stepped in, that he was like the interim guy because their youth pastor had just stepped down. I say stepped down, it was a little bit more messy than that. It turns out the youth pastor's dad was the pastor there for 25 years and more and had recently become the associate pastor so that a new pastor could come in, right? And the youth pastor, he came forward or things got found out, I believe,
Something like that, yeah.
that maybe some things were going down in a way that they shouldn't, and there's some shady stuff kind of happening. I don't even know all of the details, but I know that a couple weeks before we even got there, he was dismissed from his position at the church. And that was a really hard thing for the church because obviously he had been there for a long time and everyone knew him and his family and all of that. And so I got there and I'm the guy working with the youth groups, with the students. And one of the nights I specifically remember asking the students to turn in prayer cards. And come to find out, one of the prayer cards was written by his daughter who was saying, "Hey, please pray for my dad because he just got fired from his job and our family is just trying to figure everything out." And so that was really hard. And then it turns out that he was there for the revival. Like he was sitting kind of in one of the back rows. And every time I saw him, I would just pray for him because I felt like there was nothing else I could do. But I also at the same time knew that's what I needed to do.
Yeah.
I didn't need to go and talk to him. I didn't need to approach him or anything like that. And then this was a 4-day event, right? And I don't know if were you in the room when this happened?
Yes, I believe so. I think I was.
So at the end of all of our conferences, we have a little segment called Celebration Set. And that's where the team leads us in a bunch of songs and the congregation worships and we celebrate what God has done during the course of our conference. And at the end of that, the youth pastor, former youth pastor came forward and went directly to the pastor at the front of the altar and hugged him and was crying and talking to him for, I mean, a good 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah, it was a minute.
At the same time, I don't know if you remember this, I'm pretty sure Christian was at the altar.
Yeah, I think Christian was too.
And Christian and I, we prayed together. And after that, I went back to my seat and I had a really great view because I was like on the second row. And the youth pastor turns around, grabs his microphone, and begins speaking to the congregation and publicly confessing the things that he did wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
he said that he wasn't a Christian for a long time while he was serving, and that was obviously not something that should have been, and that he had recently confessed Christ as Lord with his dad. And it was just a beautiful story of honesty and transparency
yeah.
and hurt and mistakes. And I so vividly remember at the end of his confessing, the whole church stood up in front of him and said, "We forgive you and we love you." I'll never forget that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a very, very powerful, very special moment. It's not too normal consistently happens where people get up and confess to that level, especially in a moment where we're not openly having people come up, we're not inviting people to come up. He was just led by the Spirit to come up and confess in front of his church. It was a very powerful moment and a great way to start off the year for us. Seeing,
Yeah, I had never
yeah,
seen anything to that level before, and I thought, well, this is going to be how it is every church now.
nope,
But
nope,
yeah, I mean, it was a really, really, really special moment,
yeah,
and I can just imagine how burdened he must have felt by the
mm,
Holy Spirit, because I mean, he knew all of those people, and they
yeah,
knew what a little
yeah,
bit of what he had done and all of that. And so God was really working. And I reached out to Al. You mentioned Al earlier.
yeah,
I actually reached out to him about 6 months after that.
yeah,
And he said that relationships were healing
mm,
and that the youth pastor was on his, going out from under the church to find a new
sure,
body, but that everything was at peace. Like it
sure.
wasn't any
That's great.
bitterness or anger harboring
Yeah,
or
that's
anything
great.
like that. So
Yeah,
that was our very first
yeah, that
conference.
was
So
our
I hope
first
you guys
conference.
enjoyed that story as much as Daniel and I
Yeah,
enjoyed remembering it.
I'm trying to think. I feel like there's something else that happened to the conference.
We,
Johnny's parents came and picked up his Mustang, and then we drove.
the worship pastor
Yeah, the
at the
worship
church,
pastor.
drove us in the church van to our next stop because our bus had serious AC problems. And so because of that, Cameron and Josh rode in the bus alone and everyone else rode in the church van. We were stuffed in there like sardines.
Yeah,
And the box truck drivers, of course, they drove their own because of the AC problem. And so that was super generous of him. He drove 6 hours there and 6 hours back in the same days. That was pretty special.
yeah, that was pretty cool.
Unfortunate for the bus though, and our bus problems didn't stop there for
No,
sure.
no, they definitely didn't. But yeah, so that was our first conference. I'm sure we'll be talking about more in the future, as there's a lot of them to talk about.
So Daniel, we're gonna play a little game.
Okay.
It's called Who is the Team Member? So Daniel and I have traveled with 40 people plus. And so I'm going to see if he can tell who this is just by the clues that I'm going to give him. Ready? So the first clue I'm going to give you is that this guy plays mini chess.
Can I just answer right now, or should I wait?
Oh, you already know who it is. Wow. Well, I'll just keep
Just,
going
just
because
keep
this
going.
is fun,
Keep going.
right? He plays mini chess. He sings harmony every time that he can on any song that he knows. He also sings louder than anybody you know.
Yep.
And he loves wearing green beret caps. Do you know who this is?
Man, I thought I knew who it was, and I still definitely know who it is. I'm gonna go with Evil Mr. Bird, aka Kai Sands.
Yes, you are correct. I'll have to make these harder in the future so that maybe you'll have more of a challenge.
Yeah, yeah, but that was a good one.
Kai, I hope you're listening to this.
Yeah, that would be
And
great.
just so you know, it isn't real. If anybody tells you they're from Oregon, they're lying.
Also, wherever you live, which apparently it's somewhere called Beaverton,
Beavertown.
Beavertown, something like that. Anyways, move to Michigan because Michigan's actually pretty great,
And we miss you.
and we miss you. Yeah, we miss you a lot. So you should come out. But yeah, it's Kai Sands, great guy.
Great guy, one of our favorite team members.
Yeah,
that
former
we've traveled
children's
with.
minister.
And yeah, there are lots of other people. We'll
But,
highlight them as we keep going in the show.
Yeah.
So as we come to a close, Daniel, this is the last segment. This is our conclusion. We're going to call this core memory. What is a core memory that you'll always carry from that conference?
That conference, the core memory.
I'll go first if you want while you're thinking of yours.
Yeah, go for it.
I remember going to this mom and pop buffet southern diner type place
Yeah, that place.
where,
Good.
like they're only serving real southern food in the buffet line and peach cobbler for dessert. And that was the first time I had food from the South or sweet tea in weeks because we had been at camp training in Michigan. And so having southern food and all sitting, remember most of us sat at the same table
Mhm.
together,
Yeah, that
and
was
it was
pretty
like
great.
the
3P.
the red gingham table.
Mm.
Yeah, it was definitely a
That's
fun
pretty great.
dinner.
Yeah, I mean, that restaurant was the definition of the South.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, chicken was fried, the tea was sweet, and God was definitely good right then. I'm trying to think of two. One specifically was the mansion that we passed by to get to that gas station buffet.
Okay.
You remember the mansion that was like, we were told it was owned by some drug dealer at some point, but it was like,
Remember that.
had an indoor actual theater in their basement, like swimming pools inside. It was massive. I remember that, and then I remember there's a church member I talked to. I can't remember his name. Anyways, I'd been talking to him. talking to him for a couple days, and he kept mentioning, yeah, I have a son and I think maybe a daughter, and he kept mentioning that his son was like really tall, really tall. And I was like, okay, I'll have to meet him when he comes by. And so a few days passed, and my son, and he's probably, I was like, what in the Southern expression is going on?
24
But
inches and 22 pounds.
yeah,
I
it was
think that
crazy.
guy doesn't know how it works when you have a baby.
But what was crazy too, I forget his name, but I remember he had the same name as his brother-in-law. And then his sister, who married his brother, the brother-in-law, had the same middle name.
Whoa.
And then whatever their first middle name was, I think it was the brother-in-law's sister-in-law on a different side of the family had the same their last name was their first name and middle name. It was something really weird, but
Talk about keeping names in the
I know,
family.
very,
Wow. Well,
very,
obviously, if you still remember it to this day, that was a year and a half ago, then
yeah.
definitely a core
No, it
memory.
was almost 2 years ago.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening.
Yeah,
We hope you
yeah,
enjoyed us as we rambled on about our first ever event. And I hope
yeah.
you enjoyed our first ever episode.
Yeah. We really appreciate you guys listening to this, and we definitely have a lot more content to go over. This was just a speck in our lives. This is about a week,
Yeah. So
actually a little bit less.
if you have questions for us about traveling, about what we do, segments that you want to see on the show, please feel free to drop a comment, send us a text. If you have our contact, send us an email, and like and follow us on Spotify. We are so excited to keep putting out more content for you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you
All
next
right.
time.
We'll see you later. Bye.